Hi there, dear friends. It's Bob Hatton again. This is the Encourager, and I hope that I got an encouraging word for you today. We're talking about Abraham. We've come into the second part of this gigantic, enormous story that God has prepared for us. We're looking at the plan that God has got for the whole of mankind. And it's got to do with this guy, Abraham, or the Abram. God called him, and we saw yesterday that Abraham, he had so many flaws. He wasn't a very moral person. He was an idolater, and so on and so forth. And part of this calling, what God has put on his life, it's got to do with him having a big family. But the problem was that Abram and his wife Sarah, they were infertile. They didn't have any children. So he was more or less right from the start. He was really disqualified. But there again, as I said yesterday, God calls these people who are disqualified. Now we look to Abraham, and I'm not saying we should look at his mistakes and look at the things that he didn't do and couldn't do and look at the things that he did wrong. But he had another quality which sticks out, and that is that he was a man of faith. And as I said yesterday, he is the father of everyone who believes. Abraham was a man of faith. Now God spoke to him. He was living, first of all, he was living in Ur of the Chaldees, and then he moved together with his father to another city, Haran. Now I personally believe that these are two cities that were close together. Of course, I told you yesterday that a lot of, maybe most of the Bible scholars say that Ur in the Chaldees was very far, a lot further south on the river Euphrates, but in what is now Iraq. I think it was rather also on the river Euphrates, but possibly in Turkey. So it wasn't very far away. And this whole area was the cradle of civilization. And at that time, this was the highest civilization where it's in the whole world. Was the only thing that in the whole world, it was the highest civilization of the whole world. That took me a long time to say that. But anyway, God called him, and he was prepared to leave this very sophisticated society to move where? To somewhere where God would show him. He didn't tell him where he was going. And so he probably left a big house and a nice garden, and they moved out, and they went across the Euphrates, and they went into the land of Canaan. And God was going to show him where he was going to live. And in the meantime, he lived in a tent. He became a Bedouin, a nomad, wandering around the country for the rest of his life, really. And the next thing was that he didn't have a child, and God said he's going to have a lot of descendants. He'd go out of him would come a big people, but he couldn't see anything at that moment. But still, he believed God, and the Bible says even when there's no hope left, he still believed. And he was infertile, no children. And in Hebrews chapter 11, it says he looked at his own body and realized it was as good as dead. But then God did a miracle because Abraham believed him. And when Abraham was 100 years old and his wife Sarah was 90 years old, she gave birth to a boy who they called Isaac. He is the father of all who believe. And this religion, or whatever you want to call it, that we belong to, it is a supernatural religion. It began with a miracle. It began with the birth of this miracle baby. Now, Isaac, he grew up, and he was similar to his father. He had a lot of flaws. He got married to a girl called Rebecca, and he wasn't really good husband. He told lies about her, and she was taken prisoner and put into the king's harem because Isaac was scared of his life. He didn't protect his wife, but he took an easy way out. And later he would look at his two sons. He had two sons. They were twins, but an older twin and a younger twin, Esau and Jacob. And he loved Esau more than Jacob. In fact, Jacob was at a disadvantage. But anyway, he has a lot of flaws like his dad, but also like his dad, he had this virtue of faith. He was a believer, and when he was a young man, God spoke to his dad and said, "Take your son, the one that you love, Isaac, and go and sacrifice him." And so Isaac took him. Abraham took him, and he took him to a place where he was going to be sacrificed. At the last minute, God intervened and he didn't. But Abraham believed that God would raise him from the dead. He was a believer. But also Isaac, he believed that God had some purpose in this, so he wasn't worried at all. And God provided then the offering. And later we read, Jacob, he was, we'll see, we'll have a bit about him tomorrow. But Jacob, he was a deceiver, and he tried to deceive his dad, Isaac, so that he could get the blessing that was supposed to go to Esau. Now, we think that it was because Jacob was the deceiver that he got the blessing, but actually also in Hebrews 11 it said through faith Isaac blessed Jacob. Isaac was a man of faith, and as we study these characters, it is really, we know that they were flawed, but even so God called them. We know they were disqualified, but even so God called them. So there's hope for me, probably hope for you as well. But beside that, they developed this life of faith, and that's a challenge for us to be believers, to live in faith. The Bible tells us in Genesis 15, I think it's verse 6, and God reckoned Abraham's faith as his righteousness. He believed God, and God reckoned it as righteousness. He was justified by faith. That doctrine that Martin Luther discovered in about 1500 and 15 or something like that. Anyway, that's it for today. So God bless you. Have a good weekend. See you on Monday. You're Bob Hatton, your encourager.